Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for asking me. I always love talking about this stuff. So
Well, it's a new week, new Monday, new moon. So that's
yes, the new moon
exciting.
yesterday, so it's very exciting.
Kerri, how did you start in what you do? I mean, you have a story that's remarkable. I read it online and
Yes, so I had quite a traditional life
yeah.
prior to now being an intimacy coach. So I did everything I thought I should do. I checked all the boxes, and I went to school, got a good job, got the man, got married, bought the house. It was like check, 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 check. And that was everything that I thought I wanted
Mm-hmm.
my whole life. And I got it. And then I was like, oh, no, this isn't it.
Were
This,
you from Calgary originally?
no, I moved it to Calgary in 2006,
Yep.
but grew up in Cold Lake, Alberta. So
Cold Lake,
I'm an
Alberta.
Alberta girl, but not originally from Calgary. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I, was married and we bought this big house, and I was looking around and I was like, oh, wow, this is not what I want. Or it didn't bring me what I thought it would bring me, the feelings I wanted to feel. And so that was really uncomfortable, to say the least. That was a really awful realization to feel. And I knew that I had to leave that marriage.
Was it once you moved to that house, or was it in like within a month or a year in, and you're like, this is not what I want?
It was pretty much right when we bought the house. I think it was just, obviously I had been unhappy and I was suffering from depression before. And I just had thought it had to be something else, because my ex-husband and I, we never argued. We got along well. But now that I look back, things were just sort of like, not terrible, but not really great either. And so I think the permanency of the house was just like, whoa, is this really where I want to like put my roots in? And for me, the answer was no.
Right.
And so I left my marriage, and it was excruciating. And so after I had done that, I naively thought, I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll go travel and have my own like eat, pray, love thing. And I'll find someone else, marry him, and that'll be better. And 3 weeks after leaving my husband, my youngest brother died by suicide. And it was just like a huge blow. That's not even, the right words, but it was just devastating, traumatic. And my foundation of everything I thought my life was and where I was going had just been completely ripped out from under me. And I had been fortunate enough to have done some sort of personal development, spiritual type work where I knew that something's trying to get my attention. I was going the wrong way in life. And so I delved in and did a lot of healing and, processing my own grief and the loss of like my marriage and my brother. Yeah. And I kind of did a little trip to Bali. And then when I came, and then about little over a year after all that happened, I packed up all my stuff. I quit my 9-to-5 job. And I was gonna go work in Australia, and I was gonna travel throughout Asia for a little bit. And so I had been recommended this yoga school. So I was like, hey, I'm gonna go to Thailand, in the Gulf of Thailand, and I'm gonna do yoga. And when I got there, I found myself living in a tantric community, and I was like, oh.
Well, let's just go back for a second.
Sure.
Did you know you were depressed before the divorce? Like, had you been self-aware of that, or was it just underlying, I might be depressed?
No, I knew that there was something I knew I was depressed. I had been on antidepressants twice during my marriage, but I didn't know what it was. I was finishing up school when we were together. And so I just thought it was like the stress of like finishing school, and, we're thinking about a house and getting married, and, finding a job can be really stressful. And so I thought it was all those things. And when those things seemingly sort of fell into place, that's when I was like, okay, well, the only thing I could left to look at was my relationship.
Okay.
And when I had done that, it's like my body knew I had to leave. But I think the tricky part with my marriage is that, we weren't a couple that fought a lot. We weren't screaming. We weren't, it wasn't anything like how I had grown up with or had he grown up with. So we're like, well, this must be okay. And I didn't know any different. But when I look back, it was in that sort of mediocre, okay kind of place. Like what I said of like, it wasn't great. It wasn't terrible either. So it was like this.
But that's really unique that you could see that, because from maybe your upbringing or his upbringing, like you said, it was totally different. So it was okay at that moment. You're like, well, this is great. We're not fighting. We're not yelling. That's awesome. We're winning. But secretly,
Yeah.
you or him not want to be stagnant, or was it you yourself said, for me in my one life, I need to leave, kind of?
It was me. So it was my choice and not his choice, which made it really, I mean, it hurts to hurt someone else. And so it was really hard. And so it was not something that he wanted, but it was something that I knew that I had to do.
Did you have a spiritual awakening at that moment, or was it on your trip or after your brother had passed?
Well, I think when my brother passed, that was just, like a huge blow. And I didn't even, it was just, it was in the shock of that for a while.
First off, Kerri, I'm so sorry about that. You went through that.
Yeah, it was, it was that was the hardest time of my life. And it was devastating. And I think that really got my attention. And I was like, oh, I really need to look at some things here, because, I was going one way in life, and obviously I'm being asked to go in a different way.
Right.
And I don't know what that looks like, but I'm going to find out, because obviously how I've been living before, something needed to get my attention. And obviously these things needed to happen.
Did you guys anticipate this happening? I mean, no one does, but were there signs leading up to your brother's passing?
No, there was no signs that I knew of. My brother did go on, there's depression in my family. So he did go on antidepressants 2 weeks prior to dying by suicide. And so that would probably be the only thing, but it was a total blindside, I would say. Yeah.
Who was your brother to you, Kerri?
My brother was, now I'm going to have to get the tissue. My brother was, I've reflected on this for a while. It's like my brother was really like the love of my life. We had a big, a connection that was hard to describe, and something that I had never really experienced. It was someone that I could just fully be with and be myself. And there was no doing, there was no proving, there was nothing. And we were always there for each other. And he was 11 years younger than me. So there was and we were raised by a single mother. So it was like me being the other parent also. And so there was just this divine connection. And so he represents to me just real love, like unconditional love. So it was, he meant the world to me. It still does.
And he's watching over you. You know that. You can talk to him whenever.
Yeah. Yes, I do. And I do. So yeah, he's with me for sure.
Now, so you go on the spiritual journey and you end up in Australia.
Well, first I went back to Bali. I did a 10-day meditation in Malaysia.
Okay.
So 10 days of no talking. and back to Bali for a little bit. And then I actually spent 3 months in Thailand before going to Australia. And so I would say a lot of my big revelations, or things that where really things started to open up for me, were in Thailand. Yeah.
What exactly were you doing during your meditation practices? So you obviously talk about the no talking, and you brought up Tantric. Now, for the listeners, what exactly is Tantric?
So there's a couple things. So when I first went to Malaysia, it wasn't a Tantric practice. It was actually Vipassana meditation. So if anyone knows Vipassana meditation, it's very strict, and there's no talking. Men and women are separated. You live in silence for 10 days. You eat in the morning, you fast in the evening. Very strict. 10 hours of meditation a day. So it's tough, and it's sitting there focusing just under your nose in the beginning, and just focusing just on that one place. So there's a lot of, it's challenging. There's a lot of purification that happened. So that was prior to Thailand. And then, so I left Malaysia. I had been back to Bali for a few weeks, or went to Bali for a few weeks. And then I spent most of my time in Thailand. And I was going there to do yoga, which is what I signed up for. And then I go and, there's all these tantric courses and all these people, women, in flowing skirts and showing their bellies and all this stuff. And I was like, what is this place?
Yeah.
And I was like very tight in my own body, very uncomfortable. And I was like, oh, how am I going to do this? Or what am I going to do? And still very tight and closed and sort of unsure and very nervous. And
was it the part of showing or exposing your body and yourself? Because I mean, that's tough for so many of us, right? Just to open up, and because it's that consciousness, right? We're a little weary.
Yes, we're very weary. And, I had, grew up in Alberta. There was, I was going to, like, when I went to Thailand, it's very much a bubble. So it was people who were, very liberated in their sexuality, very open, could talk about things. And that was not where I had come from or anything that I had experienced ever. So once I was there, it was like, oh
my God. Awesome. So then, you're seeing all this bubbliness and open sexuality.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it was, I was uncomfortable, and I remember like not knowing what to do and sort of keeping to myself. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be here for 3 months. So, you know what, when in Rome, let's just sign up for these workshops.
Right.
So I had been doing yoga, and then this Tantra course came, and there was 3 of them. And I was like, okay, well, again, when in Rome, I'm here. This is why I came here, to sort of discover, explore, because I didn't know where my life was going to be heading. I had no idea. So I was like, okay, so let's open up and try something totally different. And I started to learn about what Tantra actually is. And so Tantra, when we hear that word, we think sex, or we think of King and, his, all this, the West really puts a big focus on sort of the sexual aspect of Tantra, when really Tantra is much broader than that. And it looks at Tantra essentially is a spiritual path, where it's like we acknowledge everything that's worldly as something that's divine. So you can go through the world, experience it fully, and experience the divine through that. And so that is very different from any sort of religion, where it's like, okay, let's push, the world is, sinful and a distraction from what's really important. So ignore it, and let's go kind of straight to God, if you will. And Tantra sort of flips that on its head. It's like, well, this world is alive. This world is divine. So it's like, let's go through everything that's worldly and go through it, with presence and being aware, and experience sort of divinity through that aspect. And so because Tantra doesn't push away the world, it embraces the world, and part of the world and being human is sex. So it's quite a small part of Tantra, but in the West, they make it sort of the bigger.
Right. No, for sure. Yeah. I mean, the Buddhists, the Hindu, they believe in it so deeply, and you can see it in the culture and the religion, and how they've really found wholesome, right, through their spirit.
Yeah. So it's like the world, and it's beautiful.
No, absolutely. When you found yourself going through it all, or doing the meditations and the practices, how did you feel afterwards versus what you feel like today?
After doing the practices? Well, when I was first doing some exercises, so meditation is still something that I do, and anyone that meditates knows that it's different every day, and it still can be challenging. And when I look back at when I was doing sort of more tantric practices, or doing exercises regarding sort of opening up more into my femininity, my sensuality, my sexuality, when I was doing them, I was terrified because I had never really been vulnerable in that way. Even in exercises where we're communicating, when we're sharing things about, what we like, or insecurities about our body, it's like I had never had those types of conversations with friends, with my now ex-husband. And so when I was sitting down in these exercises in a group and people are sharing, there's back and forth, I was petrified to like, I could feel the vulnerability. And, right after it was just, there's, when you get some sort of validation of, hey, me too, or that's normal, it's like, I get that, I see that. It's so liberating where it's like, oh wow, I don't have to be hidden down in the shame of because of what I desire or what I like or how I feel about my body or my insecurities. It's like, well, I can open up and share that. And then once I do that, they don't really have the power over me that they used to.
Yeah.
And so now when I look back at those exercises, it's a lot like there's always layers to this, but they're a lot easier for me to sort of share on certain topics or to redo the exercises. And I look back, I'm like, wow, I've come such a long way because there was a time where I wanted to be running out of the room and now I'm teaching it. So there's been
it's an irony, right? It's like this onion that we have and we start peeling the layers off that we've built in our own minds of our own self. But it's those questions. You're right. You don't want to ask people. It's those things. Oh God, my belly looks a little big today or whatnot. But hey, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. And we all have those things.
Yes. And we don't talk about it. You're right. It's really interesting to see that perspective on it. Did it help you build your confidence as the onions layers peeled off or the layers peeled off?
Oh yes, absolutely. Delving into, Tantra and looking at my femininity and sensuality and all that stuff, it's been the most empowering thing I've ever done. I was very insecure about my body before going, very insecure. I think I was wearing like long sleeves and like yoga pants, like in Thailand. It's like plus 30. And so, because I was so insecure about my body, growing up, I have a birthmark. I was born with a birthmark that covers my whole left arm. So I was so insecure about that. I was like, oh God, I don't want anyone to see it. I don't want anyone to look. I don't want any of this. And it was just like, oh, it's there. And no one thinks that it's a big deal and it's okay. And so the energy of it just wasn't so bundled up anymore. And so it was just so liberating to just not give it so much energy or thought anymore.
Isn't it beautiful to see the pendulum swing over?
Yeah.
And with your mark, like you said, it's now you can rock it and you're one of a kind. You're you. That's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just part of, who I am. And it's so nice now. Like, when I'm changing somewhere or I'm going out somewhere, it's like, I don't think about it. And when I was growing up, it was just constantly what I thought about or what I was nervous about or, and now it just doesn't have the hold on me anymore.
Now, when you look at yourself today versus the person you were going on that trip, who was the Kerri back then and who's the Kerri today?
Well, I think one of the main things of the Kerri growing up is like, I wanted to be the good girl and I wanted to do everything right. And, I wanted to maybe not have the upbringing that I had. And so I was coming from this place of really not knowing myself and sort of falling into sort of these boxes of this is everything I should do, or what society tells it's like, okay, well, let me get the job and the men and, this kind of stability. And so I really didn't know myself at all. And I never really questioned anything either. So, if I look now, it's like I know myself a lot more. I know what I value. I know what's important to me. I know how I want to feel in my life. I'm more connected to my intuition. I feel more empowered and more liberated. And, in me being sort of who I am in my sensuality and just coming from a more empowered place. And so I would say it's a 180 degrees from before and after sort of that journey, definitely.
Start feeling better about yourself in terms of your sexuality. Does it help improve? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So if I look at my sex life pre-Thailand, let's say, I wasn't, my own pleasure wasn't even on the table. And that's not any man's fault. I just I'd never made it a priority. It never crossed my mind. It was like, I was approaching sex of, I enjoyed sex. I liked being, that level of kind of intimacy with a partner, but my pleasure was never on the table, or I I would never voice what I want or ask or anything, or I would just, maybe want to have sex with the lights off or not in certain positions because of various things of my body. It was just, there was just a big contraction around it.
Right.
And so as I sort of did my own work and I'm feeling more confident in my own body and learning about, what pleasure can really do for like the human body and what that really means, and the sacred act of sexuality. It's like there was more of an openness in my mind, my body, and it's empowering to like, be naked with a man. And it's like you're not thinking about like, oh God, do I have to like walk backwards to the bathroom, or is he looking at my arm? Or it's just like when you're not thinking about it and you can just you're free and you can give yourself to the interaction in the moment, and you're not putting all the focus on the insecurities. You're fully present in the moment and experiencing everything and feeling everything that's happening.
And it doesn't matter if, I don't know, you're feeling full or whatever you're feeling, you can just be yourself. If you want that, I mean, I think you need to also stop worrying about the insecurities.
Right. Yeah, it's very difficult to focus on sort of the pleasure that you're feeling in your body when you're worried if he's like looking at your love handles. Yeah. Like when that's where the focus is. So once we could sort of begin to shed that and not be so bogged down by our insecurities, and just, because the truth is, as a woman, it's when I started opening up, I discovered that like men actually don't care. And they don't care. It was me the whole time. They don't care. And so once I could drop that, and once I had some knowledge about sort of, I'm like, oh, wow, I could have different types of orgasms and I could do this. It's like starting to bring my focus there and starting to be like, really be in tune with like the pleasure happening in my body. Then it's like, well, this is way better than worrying about what my bum looks like or what my arm looks like or my stomach or whatever. I was like, being really present with the pleasure that I'm feeling, and like in that buildup, because where the mind goes, the energy flows. So if we focus on the pleasure in the moment that our partner's feeling, that we're feeling, it's like then we can get to that place. But when we're bogged down with insecurities, it's like our mind is just, it's there. It's not going to sort of the pleasure that we are or could be experiencing.
Is a goal to forget the world and everything around it and be in that moment and really feel everything?
Well, there's a beautiful, feeling is a really important part of it. So oftentimes touch, and oftentimes when we think we're feeling, but we're not actually feeling. So being really present with the sensations happening in our bodies and in our body, and then what feeling does that bring us, and getting really in touch with that place. And so if we're talking about sex and like a sexual interaction, right, there's this really beautiful term in Tantra where they call transfiguration. So where we drop, it's actually from the Bible, but a term in the Bible, but we actually sort of drop away and start, like, we don't look at our partner's sort of this physical, like, oh, she has a bump on her nose and he's like this. And we're in a state where we see through that and we see sort of the true essence of a partner. And it's like where we're just sort of our true energies and we're just moving, we're together. So part of getting there is being able to be aware of that energy, being present to it, and cultivating that together. So that's what makes sex a really beautiful spiritual connecting practice.
Two particles moving around. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Or particles. Yeah.
Yeah.
How important is aura, and finding what your aura is and honing in on your aura and your energy around you?
Well, I think, we're responsible for our own energy and the energy that we give out. So our own energy is very important, and wherever we are in our life, it's like, if I look back before Thailand, it's like, what energy was I giving off before? It's like this tightness, this contraction, this insecurity. And, my experiences were really limiting. And once I started to sort of make different choices and open myself to something else, it's like my whole energy of how I even carried myself and experiences and people I was attracting began to shift. So that's something that's really important, to be responsible for our own energy. And it's like, hey, what kind of energy do we want to be aligned with or start to cultivate and exude. And that's our own practice of being able to do that, because people unconsciously or consciously, they can feel those things.
Yeah.
And it's something that's, your own energy is very important, very important to maintain, and not sort of draining your own energy with various experiences or people. So it's a very important thing to sort of, be vibrating at a certain level and be sort of containing your energy in your body.
Kerri, what is behind you exactly? So who is that?
Oh, so this is Shiva.
Okay.
So this is it's a Hindu god. So in Tantra they talk about, I mean, from what I've learned, well, I've been to India, and it's we can have Shiva and Shakti, which is like the masculine and feminine, and then there can be like Shiva, which is like the oneness. And so this is Shiva. Yeah. So I got that in Bali.
Yeah.
And so that's my background. So yeah. And then this little picture here is both of Shakti and Shiva. So the divine feminine and divine masculine. So.
And beside that, who is that? Shiva again? The statue?
So this is Kuan Yin. So it's the goddess, or in Tantra we call her Tara. Okay. So the goddess of love and compassion. Yeah.
How big are you on crystals and the new moon and everything?
Well, I do have. I wouldn't say I'm not a connoisseur, I guess, if that's the right term, but I do have a lot of crystals around. I think that, times when in my life, I'm an air sign, so being grounded isn't the easiest thing for me from time to time. I'm a Gemini, so anyone who knows that, anyone who knows astrology would get that. And so I remember at times putting like red jasper in pockets of my jeans or in my purse to carry with me. And then even selenite, having that beside my bed, like having different dreams. So it's something that I think is really important, or can really, if we're going through a certain process, they can sort of be nice aids to help us along. Right. So, and new moon and full moon. So new moon is good for planting seeds and intentions. Full moons are good for releasing. So I think ritual is a really beautiful, rituals are a beautiful way to sort of practice your own devotion, or, practice for yourself. And I think that's something that's also big in Tantra, which I think would be, when people start getting back to ritual, I think it's something that is really aligning and fulfilling, and just, it's a beautiful practice that I think most people, it's a beautiful thing to get back into.
When you practice these exercises, how good has it been on your mental health?
Oh, well, I was suffering from depression prior to, and I haven't even questioned going on antidepressants since. Wow. So, for me, that's an individual choice for everyone, of course. But once I started to get back into my own body and working on my own energy and making conscious choices for myself and doing a lot of yoga and meditation, that shifted so many things for me, and being really conscious of my needs, my desires, making different choices. So my mental health, like I said, I haven't even batted an eye. I'm thinking of going back on antidepressants. And once I made those shifts in my life and really like doing yoga and meditation, I never thought once about going back on antidepressants. So it has really, it's my own spiritual practice has, given me more than any antidepressant could, like this really deep, fulfilling, I think the depth that we're all really looking for.
Are you in Calgary, or are you in Cold Lake now?
No, I'm in Calgary. So okay. I was living here for many years. And then when I left, I was overseas, from 2014, I came back in 2018, and I've been back in Calgary ever since. So yeah, I'm bringing this work to Calgary, Alberta.
Now, what made you get started in, obviously, it worked for you. How did you realize, well, I think I want to make this a career choice and a shift for myself?
Well, I think very much for me in the beginning, it was just for myself, because I was healing. I was sort of still processing sort of my own grief. And then I remember being like, after taking a few courses and just feeling the most empowered and liberated that I had ever felt in my life. And I remember being in this ritual at the end of a workshop, and I had to like strike this pose as the goddess, as this tantric goddess.
I love it.
And this man was sort of bowing in front of me, and in devotion. And, you know, I felt this energy, like this life force, this feeling of desire for the first time. And it wasn't associated with him. It was like, oh, that's mine. That's my energy. This is how, I was like, wow, this is how you're supposed to feel in life. I'm like, wow. It was just, just, I'd never experienced anything like that before. And then we went into a meditation, and I got this realization. I was like, oh, wow, this is why all that stuff happened. This is why all that stuff happened. This is why I had to leave my marriage. This is why my brother died, because I needed to get here and learn this. And so after I had this sort of realization, I just delved into, going back to Thailand as much as I could, teacher trainings. I had the opportunity to live there for 1.5 years. And I was like, this is what, more women need to learn this. This is so empowering, and seeing sort of the impact on men as well, and how, it's just has fulfilled my relationships so much more. I was like, oh, I guess this is the direction. This is why I experienced this all, because I need to go in this direction. So it was definitely a calling, for sure. It chose me. Right. That's how I'd say it.
When you were able to find a partner again in life, was it a better run at things?
Yeah, well, I think for me, of just knowing myself more, like, okay, this is what I value. These are things that are important to me. This is the direction I want to go. That's really helpful, instead of like blind leading the blind, and being aware of like my own needs and things that brought me joy and pleasure. Because that really is my own responsibility. If I don't know those things, then a man's not going to know. Right. So poor guy won't sort of know what way to go. And so once I started, I entered relationships after Thailand, it was just way more from this open place of being clear and sort of what I was looking for and what I desired, and my own pleasure, and having like the best sex that I have ever had. And, all these things where I was like, oh, wow, I know myself more on every level. It's like, I know sort of my emotional needs. I know my physical needs, my sexual needs, all my desires, and where I want to go. It's like, I was like, oh yeah, this is why we sort of work on ourselves, is to get to this point. And yeah, so it definitely elevated my relationships, for sure.
Wish at a younger age or in high school, they would teach more on the self-awareness component.
Yes. Well, because I think, sometimes, especially when we go, like when I was 18, like I didn't know myself. I didn't know. I was just going along with what I thought I should do, because I didn't know any different.
What's cool, what your friends are doing, or you just go with the flow.
Like, well, you just go, well, then you get married, you go to school, and you'll do that for the rest of your life, and you'll get married, and then you're going to have you're going to have babies and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, do we have other examples that we could show people? It's like that path might be for some people, and it's like, that's fantastic. We need people that are called to be mothers and called to be fathers. It's wonderful. But it's like, but not everyone fits on that path.
No, and those other paths can be beautiful.
Yes.
Right? There's nothing wrong with starting again. There's nothing wrong with rock bottom. Seriously. Yeah. Yeah.
There's I'm going to butcher it, but there's a wonderful like Bill Burr quote where it's like, we think that, sleeping on a mattress in, someone's living room is the worst thing that could happen. But it's like, really, if you're in a life that with someone that you don't love, and a job that you hate, it's like, you're going to be wishing that you were sleeping on the mattress, of like, that you'd have some sort of fresh start. And so, yeah, those other paths can be really beautiful. And yeah, we have to stop making people bad or different because they want to do something that's sort of out of the norm.
What kind of programs or exercises do you have, Kerri, that people can look into? Because I think what you're doing is remarkable, and I think more people, and I wish more people would be self-aware. I wish I had learned it earlier.
Yes, I know. We all have some of us have to learn lessons the hard way, and then teach others. In terms of my programs, I'm very much looking forward to holding in-person workshops again. We'll see when that is. And right now I'm doing working one-on-one with women and couples. Some men pop in there once in a while. And then I have an online course for couples coming up at the end of May. And so all about how can we come back to real connection and intimacy, especially after all this, the chaos of everything that COVID has brought us, but connecting from like a deeper real place, especially in something that's more embodied. So there's a lot of practical exercises in what I offer, because it's not enough just to have more information in your head, but it's like, how can we experience it? So what we're learning is more embodied. So we actually have like pathways in our brain, new pathways of how we can engage in intimacy, that intimacy is safe. And all this, because if we just have more information in our heads, but it's not integrated, then, the same, okay, that's when we get into the place where it's like, okay, I know I should do this, but I'm going to keep doing this because it's not integrated. That sort of pathway isn't there in the brain. And so lots of embodiment exercise and starting to communicate. So many couples don't, communicate outside of sort of bills and kids and day-to-day things. It's like, how do we take our communication to a next level where we can be more transparent and open up about sort of what I need and what I desire, and really getting that spark back.
Have you seen COVID bring challenges to couples?
Yes, definitely. So there's a couple things that can occur. So there's two things that can happen in a relationship. We could have a relationship issue, or we could have a polarity issue. And the tricky part is that what makes for good relationship is what's opposite that makes for good polarity. And what makes for good polarity is the opposite of what makes for good relationship. So it's a little bit tricky. And the challenge is not many people know this. So polarity, what does that mean? It's like if you think of two magnets coming together, there's that huge attraction. So we've all experienced this at the beginning of relationships, right? Where it's easy to want to like desire each other and tear each other's clothes off and have sex, right? And what makes for good polarity is sort of like differences, time apart. And what's good for relationship is like commonality, sameness. But what can happen is like when we're with our partner day in and day out, and we're constantly seeing them and there's no space, that polarity can kind of get a little bit neutral. So that spark isn't really there. And it's like, and that can be challenging. So a lot of times I hear people, it's like, okay, we have a really great relationship, but it's like, I have no desire. It's like, or feeling that like that desire. It's like, hey, I want to go upstairs. Some people are just, when the polarity is a little bit neutral, we sort of lose that a little bit. So
how does the neutrality happen?
Because we're together all the time, and the sameness. So it's like the two poles, like north and south poles, they're becoming kind of similar together. So the attraction and the pull and the magnetism isn't there because we're spending so much time together. We're constantly talking. We're constantly doing the same thing. There's no space there for the desire to build. There's no differences. It's like, so things can get a little bit neutral. And so, oftentimes people think, well, should we go on a date night? Should we do? And when we have that sort of polarity issue or that attraction, it's like really sometimes what can happen or what we need is really like a pulling apart. So the man if we're talking about a heterosexual relationship, the man can go off and do his have some space to go do his manly guy kind of stuff that guys like to do. I don't know, golf or, wrestle or hang out with guys or whatever it is that men, things that men, like to do. And then the woman can go off and really drop back into her femininity, what gives her sort of an aliveness and a fullness in her body, being with girlfriends, communicating, whatever that looks like for her. And it's like, so these two poles go away and they get nice and charged up. And then there's space for that desire to build. And so when you come back, it's just like, it's like those magnets are recharged so we can come back together. And there's that spark again.
Kerri, let's say an everyday situation here in today's era. Mom and dad live together. They've got kids, full-time jobs, working from home. And now the kids are at home, homeschooling or whatnot. How do you find time out?
Yeah, so finding time, I hear this a lot that people don't have time. So, and we're all busy.
Is that the excuse though?
I would say busyness is a story. For sure. We all find, because we all find time to go to the gym.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's like, I really need to have a night out with the girls. I really need to have a night out with the guys. We can, make that, carve out that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we do that? So my question to people is like, well, how can you do that in your relationship or for your relationship? And so, having, if there's a polarity issue, it's like, how can, mom go out one night, dad go out one night, there's some separation so we can have that. And if we're having more, the couple's not really having a lot of time together. It's like, okay, so what do we need to make that happen? And having both partners being a part of how can we make that work? So both people making the effort of like, okay, maybe one's going to clean up while the other one puts the kids to bed. And then we're having a time with no television and we're going to have a bath or whatever. And so, and one thing that's really important, especially for women, is when we've been sort of going all day and we're really in our heads and more in our sort of masculine of like getting stuff done, to make that transition into going to more into your feminine, that doesn't happen by a flick of a switch. So, women need sort of that transition time, or what I call goddess time. So it's like, what does that look like? So for me, that would look like a bath. It's like, hey, I've just, had a full day of like doing podcasts or clients or doing all this stuff. I'm in my head, I'm in go mode, and I want to drop more into my feminine. And so for me, it would look like having a bath and dropping more and feeling more into my body. So I'm actually available for, whatever sort of interaction is planned for or presents itself.
Is the hardest thing the shift, though, from going from that go-go mentality to that calm Zen mentality?
Yeah, well, it can be, especially when we are so busy and it's like, oh, I could just go and do this, or I can just go and do that. But if you're in a relationship, my question is, what was the commitment and what's the priority for, tonight? If tonight's date night, then, what do we, there's a choice that has to be made. I think the transition time it can be a bit challenging because you need sort of a little chunk of time, at least like 20 minutes of really starting to like, for a woman to really get back into her body and start to feel, because I'm sure men have had many situations with women where they're not really there, or they can't really feel, or they can't, and that doesn't really make for, yes.
I have, yeah.
Yeah. And that doesn't make for like a great session where there's a real opportunity to like connect with your partner in a way that you don't connect with other people. And it's something that, especially for men in that sort of opening, in that sexual interaction, that's where men get a lot of connection and feel love in the opening. And so what's tricky is for women, it's the lead up for us that causes the opening. So this is where it's a bit tricky between men and women. So the woman needs to feel, safe, loved, adored, leading up in order for her body, her heart to open to you. Mm-hmm. But in the opening is where men feel loved. So like that's the greatest gift for when a woman opens her heart, her body, her legs to you, and that sort of surrender piece. So that's where we're a little bit different. So that's why women need a little bit more love in order for the opening to occur. And it's good for women to know that in that opening, that's where your partner, your male partner, is getting sort of his love and connection that he's looking for.
We're all human beings. Will we ever have a chance to keep that high or that, I guess, opening always in a relationship? Because a lot of people say that's the honeymoon phase and that's where they stay, right? And then, oh my God, the honeymoon phase is the best. And it's for a man or a woman. And then the spark sometimes, like you said, fades or it's gone. How do you reignite it or keep it there? Can you?
Yes, you can keep it. So it's important to look at sort of really be sort of having your fingers on the pulse with your relationship. And I understand that life gets busy with work and kids and all that stuff. And the relationship sometimes can take a little bit, kind of falls off the priority list a little bit. Right. So having agreements as a partner, as partners, as like, okay, where is this on our sort of priority? and coming to that agreement.
Mhm.
And so, yes, there is a honeymoon phase, and naturally there could be sort of that loss of polarity. And it's number one, being aware of it. So knowing how to create polarity, like how I just talked about, sort of like men going off doing their thing, women going off and doing their thing. So having that awareness that maybe, yes, my husband, my partner needs this, he needs to go off and do that. And that's actually a good thing for our relationship, rather than like, oh, he's going away with the guys and that sort of thing. And knowing that that's actually good for our relationship, and me going off and doing this, and us kind of consciously coming together because now we have the awareness and the tools of what brings that spark back. And just having, and yet, yes, there's a honeymoon phase, but there's a real opportunity as we move forward in relationship. It's like things can also get to a greater depth, and we can become closer. And when we're continually, communicating with our partner and opening up and sharing, it's like there's a greater depth there that, is something that I think we're all really looking for. So it's like, yes, the honeymoon has its great points, and it's like there's a real depth that the relationship can go in if both people are conscious of that and make it a priority. And then they have those tools for polarity. It's like, okay, do we really need time together because, we haven't had a lot of time? Or is this a time where we've had too much time together and we need to sort of separate so we can come back and things are sort of recharged?
Right. Kerri, I love that you post videos frequently on your social media. It really helps people resonate and connect with some of the things that men and women think about, right? So.
Yeah, so it's important, and especially those masculine and feminine dynamics, I think, in relationship. I mean, if people just knew that, there would be such a relief, because it's like, there's so many things, as a woman, it's like that men do that's so frustrating, and vice versa, I understand. But it's like, if we had the knowledge of like, oh, it's nothing personal. He's a man, he's just wired a little bit differently. Then there's just like I don't have to take it personally. That's him doing his guy thing. And then same with men with women, because there's a lot of stuff we do that drive men crazy too. And so
we're all human beings, and we're
sure.
all on this path, right? We're trying to figure ourselves out. That's
yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think you can be a good person or a bad person, and you figure that out yourself. It's up to you, right?
Yes, exactly.
The choice is yours. How do you get someone from stagnancy or where they're at? Because when you're stagnant, you can think in your head, oh, I am comfortable. This is the way life should be. This is life, whatever. I'm unhappy, but that's life. How do you realize that's not life? You can be happy. Happiness is a choice.
Yes. And so I think, if people are starting to question if they're happy, what I would say is, okay, that might be an indication of something. Or when you're starting to think of like, what would more look like? And so in order to get someone out of stagnancy, is like something that's really simple, is starting to make really conscious choices, because the shadow of choice. So when we're not making choice, we're sabotaging ourselves. So if I look at my marriage, I was just sort of rolling with the punches sort of thing. I wasn't making any conscious choice whatsoever. And I totally sabotaged myself. So, and I got to this point where I was like, okay, I need to start making some choices here, because my life is sort of going in this way that it's not really working for me. And I've had clients like this too. So it's just like starting to make conscious choice, even like the smallest things when you don't know where to start. It's like, okay, well, what clothes do you want to wear today? I want the blue shirt. I want to wear the white underwear. And making, starting to make really conscious choices. I'm taking this way to work. No, I'm going to do this. And that it's really subtle, but the subtlety doesn't get the credit that it deserves. So when we start to do things even subtly differently, things kind of start to shift a little bit more. And then we can start be aware more of sort of what choices we're making. It's like going along with this. It's like, well, maybe I don't want to go out for dinner. I'm there. I want to go here. And then that sort of gives permission to sort of start to question, make choices around other maybe bigger things. And so starting to make choice is a really powerful thing, because when we're not making choice, we're sabotaging ourselves.
I would say the tiny little things, they matter.
They add up. Much. And, if we want to start to have a pattern interrupt and we don't know what to do things, it's like, if you walk the same way to work every day, walk on the other side of the street, go to the other grocery store, go like those things, those those things matter. Those things make a difference. So that can, be something really small that people can do that really has, I mean, I've seen it with clients have profound effects where it's like, oh, wow, okay. I'm starting to like have clarity and it's like, no, I want this. I don't want that. I'm going to do this and not that. And that can shift things a lot.
Super cool. Kerri, if someone wants to get a hold of you, what can they do here?
They can go to my website. So my website is my name, kerricust.com, and my email address is kerri@kerricust.com, and they can get in contact with me, and I have a free hour with people. So if they want to talk to me about things and see if there's something in alignment or whatever, then we can do that.
Thank you so much for your time today, Kerri.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.